Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 29 of the Unknown Comics podcast. I'm Tanner, and I'm here with one of our employees today, Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael. I've been here about 3.5 months now, getting into all of it.
Yeah, lots of nerd stuff. Tell us kind of your background of being a nerd.
Okay, I grew up, my mom's an English teacher. She's now transitioned into doing other stuff with teaching, but she always really emphasized reading with us. And mom loves fantasy as well as so she would sit down with me every night, and we would sit back and read at least a chapter or two of different fantasy novels. We did Narnia was one of the first ones that I ever read, and then we had the characterized audiobooks, so you actually got to hear all the voices that we would listen to on like car rides. We did Lord of the Rings, Hobbit. Hobbit I did more on my own, and some of the Lord of the Rings we read together, but some of it I did on my own when I was a little older and could actually understand.
Yeah, there's a big gap there between like reading level of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah, and then we would do we had all sorts of the Christian fantasy novels, just some really obscure ones that I highly recommend. But my favorite is this series called Dragons in Our Midst, and it's this whole fantasy adventure of modern times, the children of a dragon parent and a human parent. And the dragon parent got turned human, but some of the dragon essence kind of carried on. And so they have these powers, but it develops as like there's still slayers around. There's still Knights of the Round Table that are hidden away around that come and intervene. It's a great series, but that's my cup of tea. Aragon, all those.
Yeah. Well, I'm super excited for tonight's show because I think I'm the only regular member of the podcast that has any interest in fantasy outside of I saw Lord of the Rings in theaters once. So, yeah, I'm super excited. We're gonna get into all the different fantasies, but we're gonna start with Magic: The Gathering. We've both been reading the comic series by Boom. I think it's been pretty good. Yeah. But I'm not much of an actual. I haven't read any of the Magic lore outside of this, so it is to me it's kind of overwhelming. There are a lot of characters. Yeah. And there's a lot of. I don't think I would have understand what was going on unless outside of having the realms explained.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. I've been kind of reading up on the lore since Amonkhet and kept up with that until just recently. I ended with War of the Spark and the craziness that was. But there's a lot that they throw at you really fast, and the intricacies of Ravnica can be a lot to handle because you've got all of the guilds, all of the leaders of the guilds, and then you've got the Living Guild Pact, which was Jace, is now Niv Mizzet, spoiler alert. And he's kind of that whole governing body with all of them. And we see three of the guild leaders are the primary characters with Kaya, Ral, and Vraska.
I think that's why it kind of seems so overwhelming, because once the story gets going, it moves really fast.
Yeah.
And there's not a bunch of filler to try and kind of figure out who everybody is. You just
jump in, hit the ground running. Some of it you can carry over from the game a little bit because we know Planeswalkers are the Planeswalker cards,
right?
If you don't actually look into that character, you're not going to get much backstory for them. We see a little bit here and there with them in this series. I know Kaya, we see her homeworld, which I had never even heard of.
We did see a glimpse of that.
Yeah, and then you see Vraska. There's a brief glimpse of her being back.
I guess
on the
she
ship.
was like the only planeswalker from her homeworld, and it was in the process of being destroyed or something.
Kaya was, at least as far as I'm aware, was the only planeswalker, and she's actually the only planeswalker to date that can take people with her.
Okay, because she tried to save she did save as many as she could.
Yeah, and she figured out the process of taking people a little too late. From what I've gathered, is her world had already gone insane by the time that she actually successfully could quickly take people.
Yeah.
So she's kind of carrying that burden.
Yeah.
And then we see Veraska back on the pirate ship from referencing back to Ixalan when she was the dreaded pirate captain that was just terrorizing the seas, looking for a way off of Ixalan with the whole immortal sun and that whole plot that was hatched with Jace during that time. And then Ral is Ral. I mean, he's been on Ravnica as long as I've known about Ral.
Yeah, it's definitely good. It's one of those, I would consider myself an all-around nerd, but I really like the gaming side of stuff.
Me too.
And so every chance I get, our comic guys, I'm like, here, try this and see if you can get into the gaming,
Oh, yeah. It's definitely a good segue. I've actually had several people on the gaming side that I've gotten into the comic side by being like, hey, I see you're getting Magic cards. Have you seen our comic? Because the first comic I actually ever bought in the shop was our exclusive of Magic #1.
I think I got just the A cover. I don't think I got the exclusive.
Yeah, it's the one with Liliana and Elspeth on
Yeah,
it.
it's pretty.
Neither of them are in this series, but I really like the art. So I picked it up and started reading it, and I was like, oh, there's more.
Well, that's a Dave Raposa cover.
Yeah.
And he does Magic cards. So I honestly don't know if he did that art just for the cover or if that was one of his extra arts that hadn't been used for anything yet and we just picked it up from him.
I don't know. I really like Liliana though. I mean, I play a zombie deck is one of my primary commander decks, and Liliana is the ultimate zombie master for all of those. And on the cover, you even see the Eternals behind her.
Yeah.
It's so cool. But it caught my eye, and it's what got me into starting to collect some of the comics that we have in the shop, just because I had never read comics before I got hired here.
Oh, yeah, really?
Yeah.
I was a big collector about 7 or 8 years ago. And then, kids and stuff happened, and I had to choose which side to went, and I stayed gaming. And but when you work in a comic shop, it's hard to avoid.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I bet with us opening the retail side, you've gotten a lot more of the gaming than you previously had been able to have here.
Yeah. Yeah, because, for a while, there wasn't... At one point, there was... Darren's first store had a huge community, and everybody in town played there.
Yeah.
And then it slowly dissipated the more it changed hands. And it's nice to have somewhere we can kind of rebuild that because, there's a lot of friends that just kind of, it's not that we're not friends anymore. We just kind of slowly fell apart, Yeah. And, it's nice to have somewhere we can all play again.
Definitely. And it's been really nice being up there just because I've got lots of friends in the gaming community, at least around here, that had been looking for a place to be because we had played at some of the other shops, but it just never was as comfortable as what we've got set up here. And now it's nice because even if I'm not able to join them, they can walk in and be like, hey, and I can be at least somewhat involved with what they're doing even when I'm at work.
And I never liked playing it at any other shops. So I got to where I always played either at my house or somebody else's house.
Yeah.
But when you're doing that, you have to be on a certain level of somebody to invite them over to your house,
Yeah, for sure.
So then it's just a hindrance to that community growing because you have to build that friendship relationship before you can have them over for a game,
Definitely. And especially just with this last year. I mean, if you don't know where the person's been, you're probably not inviting them into your house.
So it's definitely been awesome having the retail side of the store. And Chris could always have ordered us stuff.
Well, yeah.
But I don't want to order it. I want to buy it off the shelf,
Yeah.
So
it's a different feeling. You walk by one day and you're like, oh, that's new.
because he could order it, but I could order it too.
Yeah.
But have actually being able to get it off the shelf is fun.
Yeah.
It satisfies that crack need.
Definitely. What is it that you're always saying is it's dangerous to work for your own crack dealer when you're in the
really
gaming
is.
side and it's like, oh, that's new. I should get one.
Yeah. We've drug you down a level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got you suckered into Age of Sigmar since the new 3rd edition's come out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm super excited.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't going to buy into it just because that's another hobby. And I mean, I've got a lot of big expenses coming up. but when someone sets down a entire starter army and says, "Hey, this is yours now, build it," you can't really say no. And I've already started looking into some of the lore. I had looked into it a little bit so I could talk to people in the shop as they came in and ask questions.
Yeah.
But now, with the book that you handed me the other day to start reading through, like, I'm getting into the armies, I'm getting into the lore, and I'm excited for it too.
My wife calls me a fungus because I just slowly drag people down to my level.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so I've been trying to build an Age of Sigmar community since the game came out.
Yeah.
I had the original starter box and was like trying to get people to play, and it was in that time where the community was starting to fall apart. So it was hard to get off the ground. I mean, if any of you guys have watched our gaming channel, we've had Stetson on the game podcast a few times. Okay. So Stetson and I, we've played Sigmar every now and then, but he's also a big 40K player. I have plenty of 40K to play, and 40K gets more releases. Yeah. So that's typically what we play, but I'm super excited about this. And as far as like going into the whole, like, let's deep dive into the whole fantasy stuff.
Yeah.
Warhammer, the Old World, is one of my favorite settings.
Okay.
Because it's got just as rich of a history as like Middle Earth.
Okay.
I mean, it's just insane. There's thousands of years of history that you can pick stories out of.
That's so cool.
So that's my favorite. It's just written well too. My favorite story arc is a 3-novel series, and it's actually about Sigmar himself. So he started as a man, just a normal man, and they were basically barbaric tribes, and he slowly united them because they were being overwhelmed by orcs.
Okay.
So he united all these tribes and created the Empire, which is the same empire that we see in Warhammer Fantasy.
Okay.
It's several thousand years later.
Yeah.
But he founded the Empire, and he basically ascended to godhood by beating this super powerful necromancer, which is now also the god of death in Age of Sigmar, Nagash.
Okay.
So
they tie in like that.
Yeah, I mean, all of these Age of Sigmar characters, at least the main characters, are from Old World.
Got it.
So that basically the super strong characters from Old World, when Old World was destroyed, they ascended to godhood in the mortal realms.
Yeah, because I was reading in the little Stormcast book. I haven't read all the novels or anything, but with how he was trapped in the eternities for a while and then got rescued by a Stardrake, or the father of all Stardrakes.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. The mortal realms to me are super abstract. I do think that the lore in the core 3rd edition rulebook is starting to iron some of this stuff out and make it more real feeling. Because that was my whole problem why I couldn't get into the Age of Sigmar lore at first, just the novels themselves, because everything was so abstract.
Okay.
It was hard to go from Old World, which is very Tolkien style, to this more limbo-y kind of setting, you know?
Yeah.
But they're starting to kind of iron that out. So he was actually in like the molten core of the old planet.
Okay. That's cool.
And it just kind of like, they call it the ether.
Yeah.
He was just kind of floating out in space. And one of the star dragons found him.
That's so cool.
And then, so that the core that he was in is actually what he uses to make Sigmarite, which is the adamantium or the vibranium of Age of Sigmar.
Okay, and that's what the storm hosts,
what their armor's made out of.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. I'm digging it. I am probably going to try some of the novels again.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to skip the first several because, like I said, they're weird. But I think they have the chance of getting better.
Well, I know that they just released a few novels too when we were getting in the Dominion box and all that were supposed to be more like of this era of Age of Sigmar.
The Broken Realm stuff has been coming out, and those are like combination novel rule books.
Okay.
And then there was the Dominion book, which I didn't pick that up because so when Indominus came out last year for 40K, it came with an Indominus novel, which I couldn't get my hands on because it was so limited. But someone I knew got it and said it was basically just an advertisement for the models in the box. So I was
man. That's sad.
So let's get it. What are some of your favorite fantasy settings?
Oh goodness. Of course, Lord of the Rings, Tolkien, that whole world, just Middle Earth in general, has so much history behind it that's one of my favorites. The world that Aragon is set in, too, actually.
Okay.
I love the richness behind the histories there as well. I know it doesn't have as many series or anything like that that's as fleshed out as Tolkien or languages, but I like the dynamic that we have there of like almost the age of fantasy has passed, but is being held together by this corrupt king.
Okay.
And how there's been this era of no new riders, the elves have withdrawn, the dwarves have withdrawn, the Urgal are still there, which are kind of like the orcs of that setting. But even they are kind of off to themselves. They stay out on the plains, they raid occasionally, but there's not those large-scale battles anymore until this new rider's reborn. And just the amount of history that goes into the dragons and the way they interact with all of the societies and the deep magics is really cool to me. And one of my favorite things about that setting, though, is the value of a name. It kind of pulls from all of the old Fae thought process of if you give a Fae your name, they have full control of you.
Yeah.
But it's if someone learns your true name, they have full control of you. That old magic is there to where you don't even necessarily know your true name until you go and hunt it down. And your true name, through great effort, can even be changed, but it is who your core identity is. It is, in the old language, the way that you would be named, and it is your essence in words.
Okay.
And we see it with Aragon actually trying to find his own so that he can harness who he truly is, his true power. And there's this big conflict over if you can learn the true name of magic, you control all magic.
That's cool.
And there's conflict over that of, well, have they learned it? Do they have this power? Like, how do we interact with that? And if they have this power, is there anything we can do to stop it? And you see how that develops with just the laws and rules of their deep old magics compared to their new modern magics, where you've got like your lesser mages that barely are scratching the surface, and then you've got your ancient dragon riders that can harness and reshape the earth at a whim. That's one of my absolute favorite settings.
So high fantasy or low fantasy?
High fantasy.
Yeah.
Definitely high fantasy. There's a little bit of low fantasy there just because of how withdrawn they are.
So what do you prefer, though?
Oh, my preference is definitely high fantasy. I've always been more into the magic and elves and
I like
magical
elves.
Creatures.
You know, and I like tall elves. I don't like Santa elves, you know.
Definitely. The tall forest creature elves,
Yeah.
Those are where it's at for me, too. I play D&D, and some of my favorite characters are going to be the elves and then the Aasimar with the half-angels, basically.
There's a Warhammer series it's called the War of Vengeance.
Okay.
And it's all about how the elves insult the dwarves, and then they have this hundreds of year long war over it.
Sounds about right.
It's awesome.
When you both live for hundreds of years, it's easy to hold a grudge. That's one of my favorite things with elves, too, is the way they perceive time in most settings. It's just like, oh, cool, you're still a child, even though you're a 89-year-old man, because humans don't have that same process.
Right.
Or I'm a master of my craft to elves means something completely different than it does to humans, because humans, I've been working on it for 30 years. Elves, I've worked on it for 1,000.
Right.
And just that different mentality that comes with the long lives.
Right.
And then also just the way they interact with nature is really cool to me.
So I have read one that's, I guess it's technically a low fantasy.
Okay.
It's the King of Thorns series. Do you know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. It's Prince of Thorns, then King of Thorns, and then Emperor of Thorns.
I feel like I've heard of it, but I haven't read that.
So there's magic in everything.
Yeah.
And so the first book, you're going into it thinking that it is high fantasy, that they're in somewhere that is not Earth. And there's magic and all this stuff. And it gets further into it. And it never comes out and outright says it, but it's basically post-nuclear winter Europe. And magic is radiation poisoning.
Oh.
And so, like, the main character, he gets this fire magic because he battled this basically like a fire demon, but it was in the epicenter of a nuclear explosion. So,
Okay.
is it really this otherworldly being? Maybe not. Maybe it was just someone that was that sick.
Yeah.
But it's really cool because you look at the map, and I love books that actually have the maps of the worlds in the front. You know, that's the best part of the book. And so you first look at it and you don't think anything of it, but the more you read, I was like, yeah, this does kind of look like Europe, but the shores are slightly changed from, you know, just looks like the water levels have risen or something.
Yeah.
But that was a really cool twist. And it just changes your whole perspective of the story. It's like, no, this was like a straight up fantasy.
Yeah.
What happened?
Did you ever read the Shannara Chronicles?
No, I didn't.
Those are set in distant future Earth after like a disaster.
Okay.
And it has this weird mix of like some of it is due to radiation, technology, and some of it is actually the like old world has come back.
Okay.
And so there's this whole dynamic of like, are they using medicine, like really advanced medicine? Are they using magic to heal this person? Is this really advanced tech weaponry, or are they actually casting spells? And you never really can pin it down, but it's a setting that's kind of like that.
Yeah.
I really enjoy those series.
It is fun to see twists like that. So what would be your definition as far as fantasy and sci-fi? Because some people would actually category 40K as a fantasy.
Really? Oh, I wouldn't see it that way. I think one of the biggest things that for me comes down to weaponry. If you are using firearms, if you're using lasers, if you're using things like that, at least when it comes to a gaming setting, I'm going to classify that as sci-fi because that is very technology based. Yeah,
so so to me, it's the driving force of the civilization, magic, or technology. That's the difference to me. The argument is that there's so much stuff in 40K that science can explain.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing is our science might not be able to explain it, but we don't know what their science is in the fiction. So
exactly. And I mean, if you even look at our world, there's still things we can't explain. And
right.
We are very technology driven.
Right.
So, I mean, if you look at movie genres, if you look at even Terminator, we can't necessarily explain how all that happened. Right. But we definitely know that that's sci-fi.
Right. You know, I wish we would get some more fantasy stuff on the big screen. I do know that Amazon, they are working on the Lord of the Rings series.
I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's real slow, and because anything Tolkien related takes a long time because the Tolkien still owned the controlling rights to all the stuff.
Yeah.
And they want to make sure that it's done justice. So
of course
it slows everything down. But it is coming. It's supposed to be set back during the age of the first age during the Numenors.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. But I think the reason that we don't see so much is bad CGI.
Oh yeah.
Because I think that's why fantasy movies flop so bad. Because when it's done bad in a fantasy movie, it's bad. Yeah. It's not like in a sci-fi movie where you can kind of fluff it off a little bit, you know?
Definitely.
I mean, even some of the superhero movies, there's bad CGI in some of the older ones, but it didn't just ruin the movie.
Yeah.
But it's too expensive to go like the Lord of the Rings route and do practical effects throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, which, I mean, anybody that goes and sees a fantasy movie now is comparing it to Lord of the Rings.
Right.
I mean,
even The Hobbit I don't think lived up to Lord of the Rings standards
Oh,
because
no.
the practical, the makeup orcs look so much better than CGI orcs. So
Totally
much.
agree. Totally agree. But I know that there's animated series coming out. Legends of Vox Machina is one that's
Yeah.
D&D setting, but it's still going to be that fantasy setting, which you can get away with a lot more in animated than you do live action.
Oh, yeah.
But I definitely would love to see someone figure out how to do it well on the big screen.
Yeah.
Without just blowing tons of money that doesn't come back.
I know we're getting a Lord of the Rings animated as well as live action, which there's so much that they could pull out of the Silmarillion. They could keep that franchise alive forever if they wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
There's going to be more Harry Potter stuff that they're going with the what is it, Fantastic Beast route.
Oh, yeah.
There's going to be more of that stuff coming.
I'll actually be honest. I have not seen or read Harry Potter, but I have seen Fantastic Beasts.
Oh, yeah.
I have no clue what's going on in that
You know,
world.
I liked it, but not Die Hard,
Yeah.
My favorite thing is to go up to diehard Harry Potter fans and start talking Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, because I mean, I've been in rooms where they were playing, but it never really caught my attention.
Yeah.
I never just sat down and read through or watched through all of them. I was very much the more Lord of the Rings, Narnia, that side of stuff.
I think it'd be really cool to see some of the tabletop stuff
Definitely.
brought into some sort of visual media. I was a big fan of War Machine up until Privateer Press kind of started making it competitive
Yeah.
only.
Yeah.
Because their fiction is fantastic also. It kind of skirts the edge because there's, depending on what faction you're reading about, it's super fantasy or it's steampunk.
Okay.
So the more civilized nations are steampunk.
Yeah.
But then there's a nation of elves, there's a nation of dark elves, there's druids, all kinds of stuff like that. So I mean, it has its part. I think we are actually getting a Dungeons and Dragon movie too.
Yeah, it makes me really nervous because it's either going to be great or it's going to be a flop.
Yeah.
I don't think there can really be an in between on that one.
I hope that I could see them doing it if they did it somewhat like Jumanji.
Yes.
I think that would be fun.
That would be awesome.
It doesn't have to be serious.
Yeah.
I think if they get too serious with it, it will flop.
I mean, if you've ever been in a D&D game, they're never going to stay serious.
Right.
I mean, and they have to have a nod to that. One of the things that we actually talked about in my group that I play with on Sundays is we hope that there's a moment where a character gets killed off and then the same actor plays a new character that walks in like 5 minutes
immediately.
later. Because I mean that's how you do it. Is somebody dies off in a campaign and maybe 1 or 2 sessions they sit out just to try and figure out this new character. Or the DM needs to figure out a way to integrate them into the story, but it's the same person. It's a different flavor, but it's the same person.
Right.
And luckily, I haven't experienced that too much with my own game. I haven't killed anybody off yet, but
Maybe you need to be meaner.
well, we'll see. I mean, they've gotten to the point in my game where they're a high enough level that I am not afraid to throw things at them. And they now actually have a cleric. We have a new player. And so healing is there. I don't have to worry about pulling bunches. So
Yeah.
we'll see. But yeah, with the movie, I really hope that there's just like a moment where we see that transition of characters.
So
And
how often do you guys play?
we usually... makes me sad to say this. Usually we play on every Sunday. But we've missed almost a month now, and we're going to miss another month just because this summer has been crazy for all of us. But we did get one game in about 2 weeks ago, just in the in-between. But between school and vacations and stuff like that, we've been missing a lot.
Yeah.
But during the school year, I mean, almost every week, every Sunday afternoon, we've gotten to sit down and play. And I've been in several other games, but this is the first one that I've gotten to DM, and we've been going for about almost a year and a half now. Because we started a few weeks before COVID and in person, and then COVID happened, and we were like, okay, I guess we'll figure out how to do this online. And about 3 weeks in, all of us were like, we live really close. Are we that worried about this? And so we just all came back to my apartment and started playing again.
Well, and if someone is that worried about, I mean, it's not that hard to FaceTime somebody in.
Oh, yeah. And none of us were that worried about it. I mean, we're all relatively college age, if not college age, healthy people. So,
Yeah.
and I mean, a few of us ended up getting COVID. None of us gave each other COVID, though. Even my fiance didn't get COVID from me.
Yeah.
She had to quarantine for 2 weeks because we had been together the day before I got tested, and she had no problems.
We recorded a podcast with Darren and Brandon when he got back, and I didn't get it.
Yeah, it's crazy how that happens. Because I mean, I had it, and it wasn't officially my second time of having it, but I had it before it had officially gotten to the US because they called it this super long name, and I looked at my doctor and I basically said, so you have no clue what this is? And he went, yeah. And then when I got it the second time, I described like how the process had went when I went back, and they were like, that's way more mild than it should have been, because like I have asthma, I've got some medical problems, and it didn't touch it. And they were like, you may have already had antibodies. I was like, how does that happen if I haven't already had it? So
Yeah.
it was just weird. But I mean, even then, we took 2 weeks off from my game, and then we were right back in it.
Yeah.
So it's definitely been an adventure to just see them explore Eberron, because it was right after Eberron came out.
Okay.
Like I was planning to run Descent into Avernus, and then Eberron came out, and Molly, my fiance, hands it to me, and she's like, this is for you. Like, this is your kind of setting, because it challenges all of the ideas of classic D&D.
Okay.
Alignment is not tied to your race. So
Okay.
you could have a red dragon who traditionally are some of the meanest of the mean, worst of the worst of the chromatic dragons, and it could be lawful good.
Right.
And so it's really fun to get to play with. Everybody in my group has played for a while and played in all sorts of settings, and getting to look at them and them have this preconceived notion and walk into this fight just ready to go. And it's like, no, the red dragon's actually trying to help you. Or they go in and they're like, yeah, this angel's going to be great. I'm like, it's going to try and kill you. And they're just sitting there going, I'm sorry, what? And it's this nice balance, because the way that Keith Baker, the designer of Eberron, built the world, he said it as, it's not high magic, it's wide magic. So almost everyone has access to everyday common magic.
Okay.
But once you hit like 3rd level spells and higher, you start getting into you're powerful, you're unheard of.
Okay.
Even the high mages,
That's kind of cool.
of the colleges that teach, are maybe able to cast a 5th level spell once a day. And it's really cool because these player characters come in and they're advancing pretty quickly, and they are being watched by all of these different groups, and they're like, how is that happening? Like, why are they special? And it gets to add this whole extra dynamic where I get to make the players feel like their characters are important. They don't get lost in all of these other powerful characters. It's
Right.
Maybe 6 months ago, you were a kid on the street who was just learning magic, and now you're casting at the same level as the professors at the university.
Yeah.
Or, oh, you were this common hunter, and now you could outshoot anybody in your tribe.
See, that's one thing I've always felt about role playing is like I want my character to be cool and like powerful. I've never understood the people that just want to make their character just a normal person.
Yeah.
Like with like there's nothing special about them, and they always want to play anti-heroes too.
Yes.
It's like I'm like,
drives me
God,
crazy.
pick something cool.
Yeah. And I got to the point in one of the campaigns I played in where I looked at my DM and I was like, I want to do something special. And he goes, okay, what are you thinking? I was like, this is going to sound crazy, but hear me out. He's like, okay. I'm like, I want to play a dragon. And there was a lot of I don't know about that. I'm like, no, hear me out. I don't want him to know he's a dragon. Because ancient dragons, adult dragons have the ability to polymorph into humanoids of their choice. And I wanted him to be cursed and stuck in that form.
That's
And
cool.
so this whole kingdom is looking for their guardian dragon that has been protecting them for thousands of years, or hundreds of years. He had just hit the 1,000 mark, basically. And he just disappears one night. And this kid shows up in town and has all of these skill sets, because I played an artificer, that he had acquired over generations of working with this civilization and helped develop these skills. And they're all looking for this dragon. He's like, oh, who's this dragon? Because he has no memory, has no clue what's going on. And as the campaign progresses, it's like there's all these little hints. And we ended up, unfortunately, moving separate ways and everything. But the way that campaign was going to end was eventually they were all going to figure out that he was this dragon and we were going to break the curse. And he would be able to go back and forth. And I'm like, that's a memorable character.
Right, right.
Whereas I have friends who are like, I want to play just like a regular human and that's it. Like, I just want to be this regular human that is good with a bow. Like, so you want to be Robin Hood? They're like, no. Like, that's too cool.
Yeah.
How?
So, like, I never played D&D or anything like structured, but I did get into the steampunk community for a little bit, and they role play through Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a loose set of rules, but it's not there's not a mechanic to the game. It's more of like a code of conduct.
Yeah.
And so my character was he had magic, but it worked similar to like Goku's power. It was strength and the ability to like teleport and stuff like that.
Okay, yeah.
But it was all magic.
Yeah.
But everyone else all of my friends wanted to play the anti-hero, no powers, like lame sauce. And so like, okay, but now I have to like pull all my punches on anything we ever do because I don't want to destroy you.
Yeah, I get that. I played in a setting where I was kind of that guy, but I got firearms.
Yeah.
I was the only one in the world who was carrying a gun. And so everybody else in the party was casters. Like, the whole party just could literally bend reality to their will. And it was so funny because I would walk into a fight and they'd be slinging spells around and people would be like, oh, I counterspell this, I counterspell that. And I'd be like, cool, I shoot you. And everybody'd be like, what? And we actually had in one of the fights, one of the NPCs is like, I raise my gun, I point it at him, I mutter some words like I'm casting, and I pull the trigger. And he tried to counterspell it. And so he was like, oh yeah, I'm going to counterspell and stop it. And got hit with the bullet. And
That's
just
awesome.
like died. And everybody was sitting there going, what?
So in the War Machine setting, there's things called gun mages.
Okay.
And they use special, most of them are pistols, but eventually they introduce rifles to the game also.
Yeah.
What they do is they inscribe magic runes on the casing of the bullet and then basically say the activation word as they fire, and it does different effects. It's a really cool mechanic. So
I got to run a game for you at some point, a one-shot something set in Eberron, because there's artificers called wand slingers. Or it's the artillerist artificer, but they build arcane cannons.
Okay.
And so they're wands that are shaped more like guns, and there's all these wands in the world called cantrip wands that they'll actually have in some settings. In my game, actually, they came across it at one point. There was an Old West shootout in the street where they did the whole, like,
that's awesome.
Square off, draw your wand and shoot. And one of them shot firebolt, the other one did the frostbolt. And so it was literally fire and ice, having an Old West standoff in the middle of the street.
That's awesome.
And I think you would love that setting, because there's the artificers that do magic through creation and technology.
Yeah.
And then you've got, of course, like your wizards, your sorcerers, all of that. And everything has a place in Eberron. If you want to play a gunslinger, cool, guns are in Eberron. If you want to play high mage, cool, you're going to have to work for it, but it'll be there.
Right.
If you want to play a paladin, there's a whole nation that is just paladin.
Nice.
Paladin and cleric, I guess, but it's a holy nation that's a theocracy. So one of these days, at the very least, I need to run a one-shot for you, because I think you would love some of the characters in it.
Cool.
Oh.
Yeah, well, I think that's about it. Wrapping us up for tonight. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
We'll have to have you on again. This is fun. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. It really helps the channel out a ton. And we'll see you next time.
Sounds good.